Sarah adjusted her husband's silk tie, her stomach tightening as she watched the line of limousines snake toward the entrance of the Oakwood Country Club. The sunset painted the manicured lawns in shades of gold and amber, but Sarah couldn't appreciate the beauty. Beside her, Mark was practically vibrating with nervous energy, checking his reflection in the tinted window of the club's entrance doors for the 10th time. "Remember," Mark murmured, his voice tight, "Mother's 60th must be flawless." "Not just good, Sarah. Flawless. Mr. Sterling is rumored to be arriving around 8. If I can get 5 minutes of FaceTime with him without any distractions, it could secure my promotion." Sarah nodded, smoothing the skirt of her dress. She knew exactly what distractions meant. It was code for anything or anyone that didn't fit into the high-gloss world of the Harrison family. "Dad promised he'd be on time," she said softly. "And he promised to wear his best clothes." "That's what I'm afraid of," Mark scoffed, running a hand through his perfectly gelled hair. "Your father's idea of best usually involves a shirt that still has the store creases or, God forbid, something with a plaid pattern." Before Sarah could defend her father, a sound tore through the polite murmur of the valet line. It wasn't the purr of a Mercedes or the low growl of a Porsche. It was a loud, sputtering cough of an engine, followed by a sharp backfire that sounded like a gunshot. Bang! Heads turned. Conversation stopped. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of guests, dressed in tuxedos and evening gowns. Rolling up the driveway, sandwiched between a gleaming black Bentley and a silver Lexus, was a 1998 Ford F-150. The red paint was faded to a dull pink on the hood. The bumper was held on with what looked like baling wire, and the wheel wells were eaten away by rust. The truck rumbled and shook as it idled, spewing a small cloud of gray smoke into the pristine evening air. "Oh no," Mark whispered, his face draining of color. "Please tell me that isn't him." The young valet, a teenager in a crisp red vest who looked terrified, stepped out and waved his hands. "Sir. Sir. Deliveries are around the back. You can't park that thing here." The truck's window rolled down with a screeching mechanical whine. A weathered face with crinkling eyes and a wide, genuine smile appeared. "Delivery? No, son, I'm here for the party. Eleanor's big 6-0. Sarah felt a mix of mortification and fierce love chest. "That's my father," she said, stepping forward, but Mark caught her arm, holding her back. Frank opened the door and hopped out. To his credit, he was clean. He wore a brand-new button-down shirt, plaid of course, tucked neatly into dark denim jeans that were stiff with newness. On his feet were his work boots, polished to a shine but clearly worn from years of labor. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who worked with his hands, standing in a sea of people who paid others to do that for them. "Sarah!" Frank called out, waving his hat. "Made good time." Traffic on the interstate was a bear, but old Bessie here didn't overheat once. The guests were whispering now, covering their mouths behind manicured hands. Mark looked as if he wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole. The juxtaposition was brutal. The rustic, noisy reality of Sarah's upbringing crashing directly into the polished, silent facade of Mark's aspirations. Mark gripped Sarah's elbow hard, whispering, "Get him inside quickly and hide that truck, or tonight is ruined before it starts." If you are still watching and feeling the tension building between Mark's vanity and Frank's humility, please drop the number 8 in the comments below. I want to know you're here with us. And if you haven't joined our community yet, I highly recommend you subscribe to Black King and turn on the notification bell right now so you never miss the satisfying justice coming up in the next chapters. Your support is exactly what helps us continue creating these inspiring stories for you. Now, let's continue and see just how far Mark will go to hide the truth. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, but Sarah couldn't take her eyes off the large, clumsily wrapped package in her father's calloused hands. Amidst the sea of Tiffany blue boxes and towering arrangements of white orchids, the parcel wrapped in simple brown butcher paper stood out like a sore thumb. Frank held it carefully against his chest, navigating the crowded room with a gentle, hopeful smile that made Sarah's heart ache. "Just keep him at the table near the kitchen," Mark hissed in her ear, his hand tightening on her waist. "I see Mr. Sterling's assistant over by the bar. I need to go say hello. Do not let your father wander." Before Sarah could protest, Mark had slipped away into the crowd, leaving her alone with Frank. Her father turned to her, eyes bright. Sarah, look at this spread. Did you say they have shrimp on ice? I haven't had shrimp since your mom passed. Dad, Sarah started, wanting to warn him, to protect him, but he was already moving toward the head table where Eleanor held court. She sat on a velvet throne-like chair, surrounded by friends who dripped with diamonds, laughing at a joke that likely wasn't funny. Frank approached the circle. Happy birthday, Eleanor, he boomed, his voice carrying over the polite jazz music. The conversation in the circle died instantly. Eleanor turned slowly, her smile freezing in place as she looked Frank up and down, from his plaid shirt to the brown package. Frank, she said, her tone as chilly as the air conditioning. You made it. And look at you. So rustic. I made you something, Frank said, oblivious to the slight. He extended the package. Took me about 6 months. It's black walnut from the old tree behind the barn. I know you like fancy things, but I thought you might like something solid. Eleanor took the package with 2 fingers, holding it away from her silk dress as if it might stain. She didn't unwrap it. She didn't ask what it was. She simply set it down on the edge of the table, far away from the stack of designer gifts. How quaint, she murmured, already turning back to her friends. Thank you, Frank. The bar is in the back. Do help yourself. Frank lingered for a second, confusion clouding his face, before nodding. Right. The bar. I'll just go find Sarah. He walked away, shoulders slumped slightly. Sarah started to follow him to offer comfort, but movement at the head table caught her eye. As soon as Frank was out of earshot, Eleanor snapped her fingers at the catering manager. She pointed at the brown package with a look of utter distaste. Get this old thing out of here, Eleanor whispered, though Sarah could read her lips perfectly. It smells like sawdust and clashes with the decor. Put it by the dumpster out back before Mr. Sterling arrives. The manager nodded and whisked the package away. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She followed the waiter, weaving through the crowd, praying she had misunderstood. She pushed through the swinging service doors into the harsh fluorescent light of the hallway leading to the loading dock. The waiter was just turning back around. Behind him, resting precariously on top of a gray industrial trash bin filled with food scraps and discarded napkins, was the brown package. The butcher paper was slightly torn, revealing the rich dark wood of the hand-carved jewelry box underneath, a gift that represented hundreds of hours of her father's time and love. Sarah stood frozen in the hallway, staring at her father's labor of love sitting next to the garbage, her sadness instantly hardening into cold anger. Sarah returned to the party with a fake smile plastered on her face, but her eyes kept darting to the back corner where Mark had seated Frank, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. Every time a waiter bustled out with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, the rush of air ruffled Frank's gray hair. Yet there he sat, happily munching on a crab cake, completely unaware that his handmade gift was currently sitting atop a pile of garbage just 30 feet away. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. The casual mingling was replaced by a frantic, nervous energy. Mark appeared at Sarah's side, wiping sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. He's here, Mark whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and terror. Sterling's limo just pulled up. Is your dad staying put? He's eating, Mark. He's fine, Sarah said, her voice flat. She looked at her husband, really looked at him, and saw only panic and vanity. Suddenly, Mr. Henderson, the club's general manager, approached their table. Henderson was a man who usually moved with the invisible grace of a ghost, but tonight he looked flustered. He kept glancing over Mark's shoulder toward the corner where Frank was sitting. Mr. Harrison, Henderson started, clutching his clipboard. I need to speak with you about the gentleman in the flannel shirt seated near the service exit. Mark groaned, rolling his eyes. I know, Henderson, I know. He doesn't meet the dress code. Look, he's my father-in-law. We're keeping him out of sight. Just bring us another round of champagne and don't make a scene. I don't want Mr. Sterling seeing you kicking out family. But sir, Henderson stammered, trying to interrupt. It's not about the dress code. I was trying to ask him if he wanted. I said handle it, Henderson. Mark snapped, cutting him off. We are paying a fortune for this membership. Just keep the appetizers coming and leave him alone. He turned his back on the manager, dismissing him. Henderson opened his mouth to argue, looked at Frank, then looked back at Mark's angry face and decided to simply bow and retreat. Unbelievable, Mark muttered to Sarah. Even the staff notices he doesn't belong. God, I hope Sterling doesn't look in that corner. A hush fell over the room, starting from the entrance and rippling outward like a wave. The double doors swung open, and Mr. Sterling entered. He was surrounded by a small entourage of assistants, but his presence filled the room. He was a tall man with a shock of white hair and the kind of tailored suit that cost more than Frank's truck. Mark gripped Sarah's arm, his fingers digging in. This is it. The CEO. Make sure your dad stays in that chair. Do not let him come over and shake hands. If he stands up, you block him. Do you hear me? Sarah didn't answer. She watched as Mark adjusted his tie, plastered on a blindingly bright smile, and stepped into the center aisle. He positioned himself perfectly so that Mr. Sterling would have to pass him. Mr. Sterling. Mark projected his voice, extending his hand. Mark Harrison. Such an honor to finally. But Mr. Sterling didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. His gaze swept over the crowd, ignoring the line of wealthy guests waiting to greet him, ignoring Mark's outstretched hand entirely. His eyes locked onto the dimly lit corner near the kitchen. He stopped dead in his tracks, a look of genuine shock replacing his corporate mask. Mr. Sterling walked right past Mark's outstretched hand, his voice booming across the silent room. Frank? Is that you hiding back there? Mr. Sterling just walked right past Mark. If you are on the edge of your seat waiting to see the look on Mark's face, drop the number 1 in the comments right now. Let me know you're watching this karma unfold. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the Black King channel and hit that notification bell. You definitely don't want to miss the shocking reveal coming up in the next chapter. Your support is what inspires us to keep bringing you these powerful stories. Now, let's get back to the moment the truth finally comes out. The silence in the ballroom was absolute as Mr. Sterling, the city's most powerful CEO, bypassed the champagne tower to embrace the man in the plaid shirt. Guests who had been whispering snide comments just moments ago now stood with their mouths slightly open, watching the impossible unfold. Frank, I haven't seen you since we closed the deal on the marina, Sterling boomed, clapping Frank on the back with genuine affection. You look great. Still refusing to wear a tie, I see. Frank chuckled, standing up and wiping crumbs from his chin. You know me, Arthur. Tries restrict blood flow to the brain. I prefer to keep a clear head. Mark appeared at Sterling's elbow, looking pale and desperate to regain control of the narrative. Mr. Sterling, he interrupted, his voice pitching too high. I see you've met my father-in-law. I apologize if he's bothering you. We were just about to show him to the quieter section of the club. Sterling turned slowly to look at Mark, his smile vanishing. Bothering me? Son, do you have any idea who you're talking to? Eleanor stepped forward, her smile trembling but fixed in place. He's Sarah's father, Mr. Sterling. A retired farmer, I believe. We're just happy he could make the trip. She said the word farmer, as if it were a synonym for vagrant. Sterling looked from Eleanor to Mark, and then back to Frank, a look of confusion crossing his face before realization dawned. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of a sound. A retired farmer? Well, I suppose that's technically true. Just like it's technically true that Bill Gates is a computer guy. Sterling gestured around the opulent room, sweeping his arm toward the high vaulted ceilings and the golf course visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Eleanor, Frank here owns this entire estate. The golf course, the clubhouse, the land we're standing on. My investment firm just manages the lease for the country club board. The sound of shattering glass punctured the air. Mark had dropped his champagne flute. It exploded on the marble floor, splashing expensive vintage brute onto his polished dress shoes, but he didn't even flinch. He was staring at Frank as if seeing a ghost. That's impossible, Mark stammered. He drives a 20-year-old truck. Because he likes the truck, Sterling said dryly. And he likes knowing who his real friends are. Frank is the largest land developer in the tri-state area. He bought this property in the 80s before any of these houses were built. The room spun around Sarah. She looked at her father, who gave her a small, apologetic shrug. I didn't want to make a fuss, sweetie, he whispered. I just wanted to see you. Sterling turned back to Eleanor, whose face had gone from pale to a sickly shade of gray. "I hope you've been treating your landlord well, Eleanor. His lease renewal for the club is up next month, isn't it, Frank? If he pulls the contract, this building becomes a parking lot by Christmas." Frank looked at Eleanor, then at Mark, his expression unreadable as he said quietly, "Actually, I was just thinking about that lease." The color drained from Eleanor's face faster than the champagne, soaking into the expensive carpet. The silence that followed Frank's comment about the lease was heavy, suffocating, and punctuated only by the nervous clinking of silverware from the far side of the room. Mark was the first to recover, his survival instinct kicking in with a desperation that was painful to watch. He practically lunged forward, throwing his arm around Frank's shoulders, the same shoulders he had been ashamed of 5 minutes ago. "Dad!" Mark laughed, a high, strangled sound. "You old fox. Why didn't you tell us? We were just worried about you traveling alone, that's all." You know how protective Eleanor gets. Eleanor nodded frantically, her hands fluttering like trapped birds. "Yes, exactly. We just wanted you to be comfortable, Frank. And about the lease, surely we can discuss that over dinner? A private dinner. Just family." "Family," Frank repeated the word, tasting it. "That's a strong word, Eleanor." "Speaking of family," Eleanor interrupted, looking around wildly. "Where is that lovely gift you brought me? The wooden box? I want to display it on the main table, right next to the centerpiece." "It was black walnut, did you say? How artisanal." Frank smiled sadly, removing Mark's arm from his shoulders with a firm, deliberate motion. "I think the staff already took care of it, Eleanor. Per your instructions." "Oh, nonsense." Eleanor waved a hand, her smile fixed and terrifying. "I'm sure they put it somewhere safe." Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding against her ribs. The fear she had felt for years, fear of Mark's judgment, fear of Eleanor's sneer, evaporated, replaced by a clarity that burned like fire. "It's in the dumpster, Mark," she said, her voice shaking but loud enough for Mr. Sterling and the surrounding guests to hear. "I saw the waiter put it there because your mother said it was trash. She said it smelled like sawdust." Gasps rippled through the crowd again. Mr. Sterling looked at Eleanor with open disgust. Mark turned on Sarah, his eyes narrowing into slits. He grabbed her wrist, leaning in close so only she could hear. "Shut up," he hissed, his fake smile never wavering. "Stop talking. You're embarrassing us. Go get the box out of the trash if you care so much. Just fix this." Sarah looked down at Mark's hand on her wrist, the manicure perfect, the grip painful. She looked at his face, contorted with greed and panic. Then she looked at her father, standing tall and dignified in his plaid shirt, the only real thing in a room full of fakes. She pulled her arm away violently. "No, Mark. You embarrassed yourself." Slowly, deliberately, Sarah reached for her left hand. She twisted the diamond wedding ring, the one Mark always bragged was a sound investment, the one he made her insure separately. She pulled it off, feeling a strange lightness in her finger. She grabbed Mark's hand and slapped the ring into his palm. "This is fake, Mark," Sarah said, her voice steady and cold. "I had it appraised last year when the setting came loose. Cubic zirconia. Just like you." The heavy oak doors of the country club swung shut behind them, muffling the chaotic sounds of Mark shouting Sarah's name and Eleanor sobbing loudly about her ruined reputation. The sudden silence of the parking lot was jarring, but sweet. The cool night air hit Sarah's flushed cheeks, and she took her first deep breath of the evening. "Well," Frank said, fishing his keys out of his pocket and tossing them in the air. "That went about as well as a screen door on a submarine." Sarah let out a laugh that sounded half like a sob. She leaned against the rusted passenger door of the Ford F-150, sliding down until she was sitting on the running board. "I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I left him." "I can," Frank said softly, offering her a handkerchief that, miraculously, was clean and ironed. "You were just waiting for permission to be yourself again, kiddo. Come on. I'm starving." Those crab cakes were the size of quarters. 20 minutes later, the oppressive atmosphere of the Oakwood Country Club felt like a bad dream. They sat in a vinyl booth at Betty's 24-hour diner down the highway. The lights were too bright, the air smelled of frying bacon and old coffee, and the laminated menus were sticky. To Sarah, it was paradise. A waitress with tired eyes and a kind smile poured them 2 mugs of black coffee. "What can I get you folks?" "2 slices of cherry pie," Frank ordered without looking at the menu. "And heat 'em up, if you don't mind." When the waitress left, Sarah looked at her father across the scratched table. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes a little deeper, but he was at peace. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I let them treat you like that for so long. I was so afraid of losing Mark, of losing that lifestyle." Frank reached across the table and covered her hand with his rough, warm palm. "You didn't lose anything tonight that was worth keeping, Sarah. You stood up when it mattered. That's what counts." He took a sip of coffee, a mischievous glint entering his eye. "And honestly, watching Eleanor's face when Sterling dropped the bomb, that was worth every penny of the lease cancellation fee I'm going to file on Monday." "You're really going to kick them out?" Sarah asked, eyes widening. "I'm going to repurpose the land," Frank shrugged. "I'm thinking affordable housing. Or maybe a really nice public park. Something where you don't need a tuxedo to walk through the front gate." Sarah smiled, genuine and warm. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel the need to check her posture or worry if she was using the correct fork. Frank's phone sat silent on the table, but Sarah's purse began to vibrate violently against the booth seat. She pulled it out. The screen lit up with a text message from Mark. "Baby, please. We can fix this. Mr. Sterling is still here asking about the lease. Just come back and we can talk numbers. Dad needs to sign some papers." "I love you." Sarah stared at the words. "Talk numbers. Dad. I love you." The order of his priorities was right there on the screen. "Everything okay?" Frank asked, pausing with a forkful of pie halfway to his mouth. "Yeah," Sarah said. "Everything is perfect." She pressed the power button on the side of her phone and held it down. She watched the screen go black, silencing the notifications, the demands, and the fake apologies. She placed the phone face down on the table and picked up her fork. Sarah took a bite of the warm, sweet cherry pie, realizing that for the first time in years, she wasn't hungry for anything else.